The frosting was supposed to be the easy part. I'd piped 100 of these rosettes in my sleep back when I ran the bakery, but my hands were shaking now, and I told myself it was the cold from the walk-in, not the thing sitting in my stomach like a swallowed stone. It was my husband's 40th birthday, and I was building the cake in our own kitchen because 3 years ago he'd convinced me to close the proof. My bakery. The one with the line out the door on Saturdays, the one the local paper called the best thing to happen to our neighborhood in a decade. We don't need the stress, babe, he'd said. Let me take care of us. You can bake for fun. So I baked for fun. I baked for his clients, and his mother, and his sister's book club, and now for a party of 15 people who would eat my 4-layer brown butter cake and tell each other how lucky he was. His mother was already in my kitchen, which is to say she was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching me work the way a health inspector watches a line cook. You used buttercream again, she said. Whitman always preferred the whipped cream frosting. The light one. Whipped cream won't hold up out of the fridge for 3 hours, and the party's outside, I said, not looking up. It'll slide right off. His grandmother made it with whipped cream every year. His grandmother's cake also fed 8 people in a dining room in October. We've got 15 in the backyard in June. She made a sound, that little exhale through the nose that I'd learned to translate over 6 years of marriage. It meant I'll let you fail and then I'll remind everyone I warned you. I kept smoothing the side of the cake. The diamond on my hand caught the pendant light over the island. 2 carats, princess cut, a ring he'd picked without me because he said he wanted it to be a surprise. It had always felt a half size too big, like it was meant for somebody else's hand. My phone buzzed against the marble. My best friend, how's the warden? Blink twice if you need an extraction. I almost laughed. I typed back with one thumb. She has declared war on buttercream. Send reinforcements and a bottle of the good red. On my way. I'll bring the red and a crowbar. There were things I hadn't told her yet. Small things that had been adding up the way ingredients add up into something you didn't mean to make. The new lock screen on his phone, the gym membership to a place across town when there was a perfectly good gym 4 blocks away, the way he'd started taking calls in the garage, the receipt I found in his jacket from a jeweler downtown, not our jeweler, for an amount that made my throat go tight, dated 6 weeks ago, for something I never received. I'd told myself 100 stories about that receipt. I was very good at telling myself stories. I'd run a business for 9 years. I knew how to balance a book and make the numbers feel okay even when they weren't. The back door banged, and his sister swept in, trailing a cloud of perfume that cost more than my first month's rent on the bakery. God, parking is a nightmare. Is the cake done? Whitman said you were doing the brown butter thing again. People love that thing. She said it like a small betrayal, that people loved a thing I made. Almost done, I said. His father came in behind her, quiet, the way he always was, and set a hand on my shoulder for half a second. Smells incredible in here. Then lower, just for me. You work too hard for these people. I looked up, surprised, but he'd already turned toward the cooler of beer, and I couldn't tell if I'd imagined the weight in it. By 6, the backyard was full. String lights, the caterers' tables, 15 people in linen and pastels holding glasses of something cold. I'd done all of it. The seating, the playlist, the flowers, the cake now glowing under the lights like the thing I was proudest of in a day I hadn't wanted. Whitman stood at the center of it in the shirt I'd ironed, telling a story I'd heard him tell a dozen times, and I watched him from the edge of my own party and felt like a caterer who'd accidentally been invited to stay. He tapped his glass. Everyone turned. I assumed it was a toast. He loved a toast, loved the warm light of a room aimed at him. I want to thank you all for being here, he said. It means everything. His eyes found me across the lawn. And I especially want to thank my wife for everything she's done, truly. Which is why I think tonight, with the people we love around us, is the honest time to say. He paused, and I swear he smiled, that I want a divorce. I have replayed that moment so many times I've worn the edges smooth. The little gasp from his book club friend. The clink of someone setting a glass down too fast. His mother's face, which did not move, which had known. His sister, who looked at her phone. And his father, who closed his eyes. He'd done it here, on purpose. Where I couldn't scream, couldn't throw anything. Where the cameras of 15 people's faces would record me as either gracious or unhinged. And either way, he'd be the brave man who'd finally been honest. I want to tell you I shattered. I didn't. Something in me went very quiet and very clear, like the moment the oven timer goes off and the noise of the whole kitchen drops away. I set down my glass. I walked across the lawn, not fast, not slow, and I stopped in front of his mother because she was the one who'd known, the one who'd been so worried about whipped cream. The cake's brown buttercream, I said. It'll hold 3 hours in this heat. Your new daughter-in-law can figure out the whipped cream herself next year. And then I walked back through my own house, picked up my purse and my keys and the leather folder from the hall closet that I'd been quietly filling for 3 weeks. The one with the bakery's dissolution papers, the joint account statements, the photographs of that jeweler's receipt, and I walked out the front door while behind me my birthday cake sat untouched under the lights. My friend was idling at the curb. She took one look at my face and didn't say a word, just pulled away from the house. We got 2 blocks before I started laughing, and then it turned into the other thing, and she held my hand at a red light while I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry in 3 years. My phone started ringing before we hit the highway. Whitman. Then his mother. Then his sister. 3 times. I turned it face down on my knee. You're not answering that, my friend said. It wasn't a question. No, I said. Let it ring. She had a guest room and a couch that pulled out and an opinion about everything, which is exactly what I needed. That first night, I slept maybe 2 hours, and around 4 in the morning, I sat at her kitchen table with the leather folder open, and I did the thing I'm best at. I made a list. I balanced the book of my own life. What I had, 9 years of business records proving I'd built and sold a profitable bakery, the proceeds of which had gone into a joint account and then into the down payment on the house and a chunk of his startup. Documentation that I'd done the books for that startup for 2 years, unpaid, when he couldn't afford a bookkeeper. A receipt for a ring I'd never seen. And I realized, sitting there at 4 a.m., the spare key to the studio. The studio. 18 months ago, Whitman had bought a small commercial unit, 2 neighborhoods over, an investment property he'd called it, and asked me to handle the renovation because I had the eye. I'd project manage the whole thing, permits, contractors, the certificate of occupancy, and somewhere in a drawer at the house was a folder proving it. I'd assumed it was a rental. I was starting to understand it might be something else. In the morning, I called a lawyer, not a friend of a friend, not somebody's cousin. I looked up the 3 best family attorneys in the county, read every review, and called the one whose old cases involved exactly the thing my gut was whispering: hidden assets and small family businesses. His name was on the door of a quiet office downtown, and when I sat across from him, he didn't do the soft, sad-eyed thing other people had been doing to me for 12 hours. He just lit a legal pad across the desk and said, "Tell me everything in order and don't decide for me what matters." So I told him. The bakery I'd closed, the money that had become our money, and then somehow his money. The startup books I'd kept. The renovation I'd managed for an investment property I'd never seen a lease on. The receipt. The party. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. He filed yet? He announced it at a barbecue. I don't think he's filed anything. A small, dry smile. Good. Then we file first and we do it right. He capped his pen. Here's what I need you to understand. In this state, what was earned and built during the marriage is marital property. The bakery proceeds you put into the house and his company. That's traceable. The unpaid work you did building his business, that's a harder argument, but it's an argument, and judges have made allowances for the spouse who built the engine while the other one drove the car. And this investment property you renovated and never saw a lease for. He tapped the pad. I'd like to understand that very much. Where are your keys? I'd left them at the house, but I knew the lockbox code because I'd set it. He told me what to do, step by careful legal step, and none of it involved breaking in or anything I'd be ashamed of in front of a judge. We filed for divorce for temporary exclusive use of the house, which the judge granted, almost annoyed, because Whitman was the one who'd walked out of his own marriage at his own party and for a full financial disclosure. Every account, every property, every dollar in and out for 5 years. That's when the calling started for real. 48 hours after I walked out, the texts came like a flood breaking. Whitman first, going through every gear in a single thread. We need to talk like adults. You're embarrassing both of us. Babe, I didn't mean for it to come out like that. Call me. Call Emmy. You don't understand what you're doing. Then his mother, who in 6 years had never once called me, leaving voicemails in a voice gone suddenly warm. Sweetheart, families work things out. There's no need for lawyers. Let's just sit down, the three of us. Then his sister, all business. You really want to drag everyone through this? Just take a reasonable number and go. I sat at my friend's kitchen table and listened to all of them, every word, and I wrote them down. Because here's the one thing I knew that they didn't think I knew. People who are sorry apologize. People who are scared negotiate before you've even asked for anything. They were scared. The question was of what? My lawyer figured it out faster than I did, but I got there. The investment property. The studio. When the financial disclosure came back from Whitman's side, it was a thing of beauty in its omissions. The startup was listed at a laughably low valuation, and the commercial unit I'd personally renovated wasn't a rental at all. It was the registered operating address of a second company, a company that, according to the documents we subpoenaed, had been quietly receiving payments routed out of his startup for the better part of 2 years. Money in. Money I'd never seen. Money that had been moving the whole time I was doing his books for free and telling myself the numbers felt okay even when they didn't. He hadn't been having an affair, or he had. Eventually, there was a someone, the ring's eventual owner, but the affair was almost the small part. The big part was that his startup was in trouble. Real trouble, the kind that brings in regulators, and he and his family had been quietly draining it into a side company in my husband's name, and it turned out, partly in mine, because I'd been the one to sign the renovation permits and the certificate of occupancy, which made me, on paper, tied to it. They needed me to walk away fast and quiet, take a small settlement and a non-disclosure, and disappear before anyone looked too closely. The divorce wasn't the end of a marriage. It was the first move in cleaning a balance sheet, and I was the line item they needed to erase. That's why they wouldn't stop calling. Not love, not even regret. Math. The night I understood it fully, I called my lawyer at home, which he'd told me never to do, and he answered anyway. I laid it out. He was quiet for a long time. You renovated and signed off on the operating address of a company that's about to be a problem, he said slowly. Which means you have two choices. You can be the person who didn't know, who got used and who came forward. Or you can be the person who took the quiet settlement and the non-disclosure and hoped it never came up. A pause. I think you already know which one keeps you out of the line of fire. And out of an orange jumpsuit, frankly. I did know. The next week, I sat down with my lawyer and a forensic accountant, and we built a record, clean, documented, dated, of everything I'd done in good faith and everything I'd been kept blind to. And then I made a phone call I'd been putting off to a woman I'd gone to business school with years ago, before the bakery, before all of it, who now worked on exactly these kinds of cases for the state. I want to be honest with you because I've been honest this whole time. I didn't do it for justice. I did it because I refused to be the disposable one. I refused to be the asset they wrote off. They'd spent 6 years deciding what I was worth. A caterer, a bookkeeper, a hand to sign permits, a problem to be settled for a small number. I was about to show them the real valuation. The temporary support hearing came first. The judge, who had read the disclosures, looked at Whitman over her glasses for a long moment and granted me support, the house, and the return of my personal property, including, I noted with some satisfaction, the ring he'd surprised me with, which an appraiser confirmed was a half size too big because it had been resized down from someone else's. I didn't keep it. I sold it and put the money toward a commercial lease. Because here's the part I think people get wrong about leaving. They think the win is the courtroom. It isn't. The win was the morning, 8 months later, when I stood in an empty storefront with good light and a friend beside me and a contractor I'd hired myself, and I signed my own name, just mine, on a lease for a bakery. Not the proof. I didn't want the old name. I called it second rise because that's what you do with dough that's been knocked down. You let it rise again. The legal thing wrapped up not long after. The side company collapsed under its own weight, the way those things do once a regulator gets curious. And my careful, documented cooperation kept me clean while it took the people who'd used me right down with it. Whitman's startup was gone. His parents' comfortable retirement got a great deal less comfortable. His sister stopped calling, which I noticed, because she'd never once called me when she thought there was nothing in it for her. I didn't gloat. I don't think I even felt triumphant exactly. What I felt, standing in second rise at 5 in the morning with the first proof rising and the smell of brown butter filling a kitchen that was entirely mine, was quiet. The good kind. The kind I'd been pretending to have for 3 years and finally actually had. A man started coming in on Thursdays. He'd been on the renovation crew, the electrician actually, the one who'd done the lighting I was so proud of, and he ordered the same thing every week and never once told me a story about himself that was really a story about how great he was. One Thursday he asked if I'd want to get coffee somewhere that wasn't my own shop, and I surprised myself by saying yes. I'm not going to tell you it became some grand romance with a bow on it. It's early, he's kind, he fixes things and means it. That's enough for now. And enough for now is a sentence I couldn't have said 3 years ago. My old mother-in-law called once more, almost a year after the party. I let it go to voicemail and listened later, standing in my shop. Her voice wasn't warm anymore. I always knew, she said, that you'd land on your feet. You were always so good at taking care of yourself. She meant it as a knife. I took it as the truest thing she'd ever said to me. I deleted the voicemail, but not before I saved a copy. I learned that one the hard way. You keep the receipts, all of them, even the ones that hurt, because someday the story is yours to tell and you'll want it told exactly right. Then I went back to the kitchen, where the timer was about to go off, and I pulled my own bread out of my own oven, in the quiet I'd built with my own 2 hands. For 3 years, I told myself stories to make the numbers feel okay. That's the part I keep coming back to. I ran a bakery for 9 years, and I could balance any book in the building. But I couldn't balance my own life because I kept fudging the entry where my worth was supposed to go. I wrote it down as 0 so the marriage would still add up. Whitman didn't take my value from me. I handed it over, a little at a time. Every time I closed a door, he asked me to close. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a man who announces a divorce at his own party in front of 15 people. He's not being honest. He's running a play. The cruelty was the strategy. Do it where I couldn't react, where I'd look unhinged if I screamed, and gracious if I didn't, and either way, he'd be the brave one. And the reason his mother went so warm so fast, the reason the calls wouldn't stop 48 hours later, was never love and never regret. It was arithmetic. I had signed permits on a building they needed me to forget I'd ever seen. I was a line item they had to erase quietly, and people only get that desperate when they're scared of what you might find. Their panic was a confession. What saved me wasn't rage, though I had plenty. It was the part of me that sat at a kitchen table at 4 in the morning and made a list instead of a scene. I kept the receipts, all of them, even the ones that hurt. I called the best lawyer I could find instead of the most comfortable one. I told the truth on paper, dated and documented, and I came forward before silence could turn me into someone who'd helped. That clarity is a muscle, and I'd let it go soft, pretending I was happy. Getting it back is the closest thing to coming home I've ever felt. But knowing the right move and surviving the cost of making it are two different animals. There were mornings I didn't want to get out of the pull-out couch. Mornings the only thing that moved me was stubbornness, the plain refusal to be the disposable one. I leased an empty storefront with shaking hands and called it second rise because that is literally what you do with dough that's been knocked flat. You don't throw it out. You give it time and warmth and you let it come back up. If you take one thing from what happened to me, let it be this. Don't write your own worth down as zero to make someone else's life add up. Keep your eyes open even when love asks you to close them because a person who needs you blind is telling you something. And when the floor goes out from under you, don't wait to feel brave. Just take the next true step and then the one after that. The quiet I have now, the kind I used to fake, I built it myself, one honest morning at a time.